All right. We're excited today. We have a fantastic guest on, Coach Dixon, Coach Brad Dixon, who's really one of the guys at the forefront of the sprint based football movement, part of the Feed the Cats movement. Really has had a tremendous amount of success with the football programs. Obviously, track and field guy as well, but really helping to apply a lot of these things to other sports and changing the mentality of how we develop athletes and develop speed. So, Coach, it's great to have you on.
Super excited to be here. Anytime we get to talk about training and what I think is a good thing, so yeah, just excited to be here.
Um, we talk a lot about the training aspect of football and speed, and it's how did you really come to you and Tony get together, and how did you kind of start to form kind of the thought process of where you are now with respect to speed development?
Yeah, people ask how doing this aspect of sprint based football, and gosh, I think I had coached 15 years at least. I think maybe 14 years before. It was really a series of things. The numbers in football, concussion talk was a big thing. We had a little bit of lull. My first 4 years as a head coach, and then we had a 5-5 season and a 7 in the playoffs, and we had 6 season-ending injuries during that time, and we gotten. At that same time, I had started coaching track for the first time in 2017. Opened this whole idea of speed and training, and I was like, wow, if I'm training my track. And so just a lot of those things were kind of working in the background, and we were looking for a because I started coaching track, even though I had an assistant named Mike Bickerman that had came to us team that was kind of talking more speed and triphasic. And I'm like, dude, we're fine. Be activated back then with our kids, which was kind of the precursor to RPR, but I kind of let it. And I was like everybody else, track's track, football's football, and that's just where like I always say, I got beat over the head with a hammer for like 4 years in a row of things happening to us. Mike ended up moving on, which was crazy. He went back to where he had came from. We got into this in 2018, and of course we, go to our first state championship in any sport in school history. No basketball, other state trophies, but we had never played for the state championship, and we stayed healthy the whole year fast, and we've just been all in ever since. But yeah, it Tony likes before, and it wasn't forced. It literally came, and there was no script, and there was nobody. The only thing Oregon was doing stuff with Chip Kelly and Jimmy Radcliffe, where they had some short practice different things, but so we just kind of.
I think we lost a little bit of the end of it because you're cutting a little bit in and out there. Um, your network cutting a little bit in and out, so I don't know if.
Okay, you got me now.
It's like you're freezing a little bit. I don't know. It might be. It might be the school internet service. I don't know. Could be.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but he's still cutting out in and out, right, Derek? A little bit, like.
Yeah, a little bit in and out. I can hear him now.
You can hear him now.
Yeah.
We can start over. I've got it plugged into. I've got it hard. What's going on, but.
Yeah, the horror. I don't know. It seems like it's cutting in and out a little bit, but following.
You want to stop and start?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Maybe log back out and I'll log back in. How's that?
Yep.
time. So let's do that. Make sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
To leave and then come back.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do. Okay, I got you good. You're good. What I'll just do is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, good.
All
All
right.
right.
I'm back.
Oh, that's better. All right, let's roll from here again. We'll run it right back here.
I think what was happening was I think it might have been trying to also connect to the Wi-Fi. So I just,
That might
Oh,
have
you're
been it.
good, Coach. You're good.
I'm just making note right now, so when I come through it, I'll cut out the first 6:30 or 6:40.
okay.
So.
Yep.
All right. Here we go. All right, we're back again, round two. We got to get sometimes that internet connection, it gets me too sometimes. I'll probably freeze halfway through and I have to come back in. Wonderful world of technology. It's really great having you on, Coach Dixon. Like we had mentioned a little bit in the beginning, the sprint-based football movement is a huge movement, and you're at the forefront of it. And what you and Tony Holler have done is just is second to none. And the evolution of where it's going is really cool and changing the way a lot of people think about speed development, training in general too. And you guys have really been the forefront of that, especially with the sprint-based football movement. I wanted to have you just kind of talk about that genesis that you kind of went through. And then we'll roll from there.
Yeah. So, we had a lot of success early. So I played a year of college football, and then I got into coaching in 2002. So I just finished up my 22nd season, and I was an assistant for a while, and then I took over as a head coach in 2011. Gosh, I think at the age of 27, and right away we had our first 9-0 season ever here. We went 9-0 in the regular season 3 years in a row, and we were 44-5. In the beginning part. That was my first 4 years. And we had 2 semifinal berths and a quarterfinals. So we were rolling pretty good and doing things really, from a scheme standpoint, very similar to how we're doing it now, but from a training standpoint and a weekly setup and with a bunch of conditioning, we're doing a lot of things we don't do at all now. So I always tell people you can win multiple different ways, but then, things tend to happen, right, that get us to change paths. Well, in 2015, we had a rash of injuries, really 2015 and 16. We had 6 season-ending injuries over 2 years, including our best player as a junior had gotten his 4th concussion, and he was done with football after rushing for 200 yards the week before, and he was one of the best athletes in the school. And then we had gotten stagnant. We had a 5-5 season where we had gotten blown out in the playoffs, and then a 7-3 season where we'd gotten blown out in the playoffs, and we were just not where we were the 4 years before, and we just felt like we needed a spark. But again, we were searching for different things, but not in the sprint world, and that's even with a guy that we had hired in named Mike Bickerman in 2014 that was a sprint guy, was a track guy, had done B activated, which is where RPR comes from, and he talked about triphasic and all this stuff. And I just, at that time in my life, I felt like I knew how to train kids for football, and he was a track guy, and why those were good ideas, good, you do that stuff with track. We're going to lift heavy in football, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to lift 4 days a week and all that stuff. And so, we continue to get beat over the head with it. And then in 2017, he walked down to my office and said, "Hey, we just lost our boys track coach, would you be interested in doing track? And I said, no, man, I had just given up basketball. So it was my first year not coaching basketball after doing both sports for 14 years to that point. And you're talking all of June basketball, all of July football, August through November, November to March. I was like, I'm done. I'm going to go all in on football. And he kept hounding me. And I eventually said yes. And then that opened my eyes to a whole new world of training, to train sprinters. And then that got me to obviously wanting to learn more about how to make our sprinters better. And that's how I stumbled across Tony Holler, the power of social media. And so I start reading this stuff from Holler, and I'm like, man, I like it. I remember sending him some text about what it was doing for our sprinters, but still nothing really in the football yet. We weren't really connecting the dots yet, but obviously we were searching for something. And then boom, in late July of 2017, he writes new ideas for old school football coaches, which was he had just given up coaching freshman football, and he had wrote down all the things over the years, 30 years, I think, that he had coached football that he would have loved to have done as a head coach. And there was a line in there that said football practices look the same now as they did 40 years ago. And that, for whatever reason, I read that and it was like, because we always wanted to be cutting edge, and we felt like, we wanted to be ahead of the game. And it's like, man, he's right. We're doing the same stuff we did when I played. And so we kind of put it a little bit on the back burner because it was the start of the season. We were starting, we were in the middle of camp and we were getting ready to start the season here in early August. But it was in there and it was stirring up things in my brain. But, I was like, well, we can't make a change like this right now. So we got through that same season in 2017. About midway through, we were in that same funk. We were stagnant and things were just kind of moving mediocre. And we were getting ready to play a team that was ranked number 2 in the state, one of our rivals. And we said, you know what? Let's not condition Monday. We're beat up. Let's take the pads off this week. Let's try to get our guys healthy. Let's see what happens. And lo and behold, we ended up upsetting the number 2 team in the state, then turned around and upset the number 1 team in the state 3 weeks later. And, we ended up losing on the last play of the game in the playoffs. But from that point on, we were hooked, and we were bringing back a really good junior-led team that was going to be seniors in 2018. And I just sat down at my computer and I started writing ideas down because there was no playbook for sprint-based football. There was one article Tony wrote, and in crazy Tony fashion, right, I wanted him to, I think of it like in junior high school where you write a 5-page essay and it's your draft and you hand it to the teacher and she strikes out everything and tells you what you did right and wrong and do this instead. I sent this link to Tony and he's like, yeah, as long as you keep the overall mission, looks good. I love the idea. Remember, less is more. Good luck. I'm excited to follow how it goes. And I'm just like, dang it, man. I wanted you to tell me if this was right or not. And so we rolled with it. And lo and behold, it was we went to the state championship game. We lost in it, but it was the first state championship appearance for any program at our school in any sport. And we've been all in ever since. And we were fortunate enough to go to 2 more state championships and another semifinal. And we finally won the first ever state championship in school history in 2023. So, that's kind of how organically it evolved here at this school after doing things the old way for a long, long time.
What were some of the key things that you and me and Derek are pretty familiar? It's more for our audience. What are some of the key things that you changed to really, from a sprint-based football standpoint, that made you think some of the biggest impact on your success?
Yeah, so a couple things. We quit worrying about how in shape kids were, and we started focusing on how fast and explosive we could get them. And, for the longest time, I know we made our most fast and explosive players slower throughout the year. And our bigger kids that were already slow were just trying to survive a lot of the dumb stuff that we were doing. And, we were never at our best at the end of the year. It just didn't seem like we were beat up. And so we really made a focus of how can we get our kids as fast as explosive. And then we started worrying about our recovery through the week and understanding that if we want our kids to be as healthy and fast and explosive as they can be on Friday, then we have to make sure that the week sets that up. And track's really where that was hit home to me, because if I destroyed them all week in track practice, they were going to be injured or they were going to be slow as heck when the meet rolled around. But we do that stuff in football all the time. And, we think, well, this is a big week. This opponent's good. We got to double down because we're going to be in a 4-quarter battle. And we pile more stuff on the kids throughout the week, and we hit as hard, it's like, well, we got to teach them how to hit, and we got to do all this stuff. And we overvalue practice and undervalue recovery. And once we started putting Friday as the most important day and making sure that what we did in practice set up our kids to walk off the practice field Thursday excited and ready, and come into Friday, they're not dragging in. That was the biggest change of things that we never did. I call it destroy them. We took everything they had Monday, we took everything they had Tuesday, everything they had Wednesday, backed off a little on Thursday, and then expected Friday to be this masterpiece. And now we're strategic about periods in which we go hard and we're physical, right, or periods in which we sprint, but periods where we back off, or parts of the season where we back off. Or now in big game weeks, we actually hit less and we do less contact because we know that the game is going to be hard, and we want to make sure that they have everything they need for that Friday night. So those are probably the two biggest things. We started hammering home sprinting, we started hammering home explosive work, and we really started focusing on recovery to get us ready for Friday night.
I think that's a huge, huge thing that coaches have to get out of, is that all the stuff you have to put in, you're thinking about all the stuff you have to put in, and not the fact that they're not going to be at their most physical best, right? And most players, the way that a lot of coaches approach it, are playing starting the game at about 80%. So instead of get them to 90, 95%, because in football, you could be a little bit beat up no matter what every week.
Right.
But 90, 95, 90, 95%, which means that over the course of the game, you're going to be at which is one of the big things Tony has talked about, you're going to be at a higher percentage. So if you're starting the game at 90, let's say you're starting at 90% in season, and you're able to play through the game and end the game at like 80, 81%, right? But it's going to be way better than starting the game at 80% and ending at 75 or 7, because you know a few more plays, or what to do. And I think that's one of the hardest thing, I think, for football coaches to get out of their head in general, that the most important thing is how you feel. And I think as athletes, yourself and myself, and I'm sure Derek, I could think back to the times when I felt the best. There's no doubt I played the best because you felt the freshest, right? And you listen, usually that was literally like after camp, as they completely shut you down the week before the season, and you went into the first game, right? And then after that, they still continue to beat you up during practice. So it's really, really the concept of it seems so elementary, but it's not, because you worry as coaches, I think, so much about what has to get done, and not worried about the recovery aspect and the performance aspect. And I think that's what I ran track and coached track for a very early part of my career. And my father's still a track coach to this day. 60 years he's been coaching, and it was one of the things that we all learned. Like when I came back to coaching when I started coaching track in early 2000s, we started to understand that stuff. And my father always tells me to this day, like, he really evolved in the last 10 years, where his sprinters, his whole thing is about full speed and recovery. Like, and I said that would have been great when I was in high school in the 90s, when you would make us run quarters, and then the next day send us on a 2-mile run, and expect us to run better in the 100-meter dash, So, but there is that evolution of it, right? And talk about what you saw from your players as you started to change, like kind of how their mindset was, the other things that you were able to do, like RPR now, to make it more effective. Talk about what you started to see in them as you started to evolve this process.
Well, probably for the first time in my career, the players, I think, could feel the fact that we actually cared about how they felt physically, because whatever we had scheduled in practice, we did it no matter what, or if we had a a 4x10 squat workout. It didn't matter, if we had played a big game the week before, that we had a hard practice. We did everything based upon on hard work. And I think that's where most coaches are at, right? Because there's security in the fact if you can say at the end of the day, we did everything we could do from a physical standpoint and we lost, it gives you a feeling like, okay, I did everything I could. When you do less and you chop practice off a little bit, or you do less reps, or you take the pads off a day a week and you focus on the technique of tackling and you don't tackle guys to the ground, there's this insecurity that if you lose, people are going to say, well, yeah, because you're not doing all these other things, and you're lazy because you're not practicing as long as the next guy. And that's hard because coaches have been instilled, the harder you work, the more you'll win, when in reality, it's the better you perform, the more you'll win. I mean, that's the reality of it. And so I think players finally felt like they mattered a little bit more to us, and not just what they were doing on the actual field, but we cared about their recovery and physically how they felt. And we were very intentional, and we still are, about why we do things. We tell our kids, hey, we're only going an hour and a half today, but here's why. And I think when you do that, kids stop saving what they do in practice for the end, right? If they know every day that there's this super hard conditioning, or your whole practice is this go, 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 and there's never a break and there's never a time to recover for the next period, then they are saving themselves for whatever's left. And so, when people cramp all the time in the beginning of the year and all that stuff, it's because their practice has been this long, steady state of third gear, as Tony says, and they've never had to ramp it up because they've always just kind of did enough to hopefully not get yelled at, because they knew at the end that they were going to have whatever was left to finish this conditioning, or maybe you started practice with this conditioning and now they're just trying to survive the end. And we never really look at the work rest ratio of what we're doing. And when you look at it, and most of the time, right, we don't have games that are live, or the coaches never watch the games that are live. So when you watch the clips on Huddle or whatever you're using, right, it's play after play. Well, when you actually, I went back, of course, and watched our state championship games, and that's the most recovery of the season because there's so many TV timeouts. But in my presentations, I like to show the amount of time that our players are standing around and waiting for the play, or standing around and waiting for the offense to break the huddle, or whatever the scenario is. And practice never looks like that, right? Because that bugs coaches, right? It makes people think that they're lazy. And that's why a lot of football coaches don't like track, because they see these kids laying around and then getting up and doing some stuff and then running a race, and then they go back and lay down. And that just bugs it bugged me for a long time. And before I started coaching track, I'm not sure I went to a track meet. I just felt like that was a whole different world. But we can learn so much more from track, because there's nothing you can do to your body that's more intense than sprinting at maximum speed. And for the best in the world and the guys that can compete and how they do it, there's just so much to learn about the central nervous system and the recovery aspect of that. I think every football coach should have to, because football coaches are competitive. And so if a football coach goes into track and tries to do things as the old school way of football, they're going to realize that the track team's not going to be very good. They're all going to be hurt. And that's where I was. And I think it just changes your mindset on really kind of zeroing everything in towards performance. And you got all these people that talk about, well, you got to have an aerobic base and all that. And it's like, listen, kids can develop that throughout practice. You don't have to spend the first, we're doing stuff in the summer, and we're doing game speed, and we're doing movement, and we're doing change of direction. That's when we're getting that stuff in. Do we need to go out and run stadium stairs and do all this stuff? And to me, the answer is no. And I know there's a lot of people that think that this is some cult and we're all out here to make money. And so we're messing up kids because we're not building an aerobic base. And for doing this since 2018, I've never, and maybe they just don't tell me when it doesn't work, but I've never had coaches come back and say, Coach, we did it and all of our guys were injured. We should have built an aerobic base. It's always the opposite. We've stayed as healthy as we've ever been. Our guys were as fast. We're setting PRs at the end of the season and all this kind of stuff. And that's the information that we get. And And I know it bugs the old school people and people that think you need to whatever the textbooks say, but that's not the reality I've had over 22 years. I did it the old way, and we were always trying to survive the end of the season, trying to figure out how to keep guys. We never had our best, or we always had a guy out or 2 or 3 guys out, and we just haven't had that since 2018.
I think the point that you brought up, there's a lot of things you brought up that are really interesting, but one of the most interesting things is about how coaches feel that this process undermines what they're doing. And it's really interesting because when you really look until we started, really, I guess the first time we interviewed Tony was almost 7-8 months ago, maybe a little more.
Yeah, a little under a year.
And I think it was the summer of last year. Yeah. And we started apply. I know Derek his high school is applying some of the stuff. When I coach my son's team and the younger kids I work with, we're starting to apply a lot of that stuff, and we're learning obviously as we're doing it. But what it did was open up my eyes to the mistakes that I was making. So, and I coached for a long time, and I was a track guy too. So it's funny because it's things that you kind of fundamentally know. And I started thinking about the times and where I had teams that were doing their best that I coached, right, and things that I had to do. And I've spoken with Derek about this. So when I coached a team where I was under these constraints because it was a co-op high school, and they had to be on a bus, and there were 2 high schools that played together, and they had to be. We had to be done, dressed, and out an hour and 45 minutes from the time practice ended, done. So meaning basically, we'd be finishing up practice, bus would be there, those kids would be getting on. We'd practice for about an hour and 40, and that team, when that was mandated, it was the year we went to the state championship. But I was in panicked because I was like, I need more time. They're like, oh, but we can maybe get you 15 more minutes, but you're still practicing an hour and 45. You're not doing your 2 hour, 15 minute, 2 hour, 30-minute practice like we had done for so much time before that. And the kids practiced so good during that year because it was almost like, woohoo, we only go for an hour and 40. Let's just get after it. And we
exactly.
We pared down what we did, and we actually sprinted. I had never done this before. We actually did. We would knock off like a 20-yard. Everybody would do 4 or 5 20-yard hills, and then right into dynamic warm up. That was how we started practice. There was no bullshit time, so we just literally we'd blow the whistle. They would stride over to the hill, start the hill, the 30-yard hill, come to the bottom. It would be lines, like 5 or 6 lines, 3 guys at a time. And they would have about a 45 second to a minute rest. They'd knock those out, and then they would do the dynamic warm-up, which was very brief, and just to get them rolling. And then we'd go right into practice. And we would roll through practice. It was like boom, 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 boom. And on days we had to get some sort of lift in, we would end at an hour and 20, and they would lift for honestly 15 minutes, literally 15, but strong, focused on quality, and they had great results. Now, I eventually left there, and I went to a place where I had more time, and I went away from that. I did remember that, hey, let's keep it shorter. I think we were going to 2 hours, 2:15, but it was never as dynamic as those practices were with that team where we did it out of necessity, right? So as Tony started bringing this stuff up, I started thinking about this. I'm like, I got to do more of this. I got to do more, meaning less stuff, focus them around what we could do fast. And even from a learning standpoint, how we teach things, like stop trying to make things complicated. Mm-hmm. Stop trying to be like, if this happens, then this happens, then this happens for your team. Give them concrete answers and let them play fast, right? And I started seeing the results, and then the RPR technique, which you guys are using. I want you to talk a little bit about that because I know that's a really big thing with what you do. I started doing it with my son. And I know right now it's still anecdotal because I started doing it in basketball season. But on days that we have done it before he played, he's averaging like 15 points a game. On times that I did not do it, meaning didn't have time, we're rushing around, like you are with a little kid, and you're rushing around and you just don't do it. Struggled. Okay. Now he's a very good player, so like the fundamental aspects of it, he's fine on. But I mean, like shooting and concentration and not making little mistakes, like reaching, and like always reaching as a young kid will do, right? Concentration type things. Okay. And I was like, I don't know. So we're gonna keep doing it. One time do it, one time not do it. Just kind of, we're tracking it just to see what is he averaging? What is his performance like with it? And what is his performance like it without it? And it's mind-boggling because there isn't that many studies on this stuff yet, right? So you're in like an anecdotal mode, but you're seeing things that are working. I'd love for you to talk a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about, but I'd love for you to talk about the RPR stuff and how that all works, and some of the like benefits that you've really seen from it. And people can, you can tell them where they can go and look to find out more about it, because that's what I did. I went and Googled some stuff too after talking, but talk about that.
Yeah, so if I go way back again to 2014, and this Mike Bickerman gentleman came in, and he was a track guy. So like at that time, you had Dan Fichter and you had Chris Korfus that were bringing in Douglas Heel, the B activated system, because Dan had seen it overseas, and Chris started kind of poking around and trying these spots on different people, and they were working. And so they were paying him to come into Chicago, and they were running some of these B activated clinics, but it was, very practitioner based, hands on. And so he'd kind of talk to me about it. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, if you want to do it. And then before games, he'd be over here resetting all these people, and he'd have his hat backwards and his shirt would be drenched. Okay. And I kind of,
we're actually talking to Dan tomorrow, Coach.
Cool. So Mike would do this stuff, and, I was like, okay, I let coaches do their thing, and players felt better or whatever. And they would line up to get it done. And so then he left though, right? Like I said, so it's like, wait, man, maybe I ought to learn a little bit more about this. And so I signed up for, at the time now, Be Activated, then RPR had spun out of it, because, like I said, mostly practitioners were involved in this Be Activated. And the whole mission of RPR was to get this in the hands of coaches, to teach athletes to be able to take care of themselves and so forth. So I drove up 5.5 hours to Wisconsin Whitewater University in June of, I think, 2018 or 2018, I think. And I took RPR level 1 with Chris Korfus, and, the man himself that had been doing this stuff for 7 or 8 years. And he had me on the table for some of it. And man, I felt way better. And I'm like, the whole mindset of the brain controls movement. And if we get the brain out of compensation mode and into performance mode, everything's going to work better. We can stay healthier. And I just, that really resonated home with me. So on my way home from Wisconsin Whitewater, I signed up for level 2 in Chris's basement 2 weeks later, because I was bought in at the beginning, and that very first day, that was maybe a Saturday. Well, Monday or Tuesday when we trained again, I brought a training table out and I said, hey, I learned some stuff this weekend. Any of you guys interested in trying it out? Well, and it was almost like we scripted it ahead of time. One of our best players says, yeah, I'll try it. And so I did all the pre-tests, and we checked and all this stuff, and took him through the level 1 stuff. And man, he got off the table and he's like, holy cow. I feel like, it was like I paid him. It was like a paid ad. And everyone else is looking around. They're like, because he was our most explosive player already. And he's like, man, I feel like I can see better. My body feels great. He's like touching the floor, and man, we were hooked from that point on. And we didn't know, right? We were searching for answers to injuries and things like that. We didn't know that 100% that whole year in 2018, we were going to stay 100% healthy and dress everyone for the state championship game, but it happened. and then we continued down that path, and really outside of a few like contact high ankle injuries that we've had, or a broken hand here or whatever, we haven't had any of the ACLs and the things that we dealt with at different times, or these guys sitting out. And it's like we're at a small school, but really at any school, right? You've got those 6 to 8 guys that you can't lose. And if you do, your team goes from maybe being very competitive to being less competitive. And if you lose a couple of those guys, then and so we've been able to stay almost 100% healthy. And when we played in 2023 in the state championship game, it was 100% of our roster. We had 100% of our roster in the semifinal game that we lost this year. In 2022, we had a guy get a high ankle in the semifinal game that tried to play in the state game. And now I know a few other things that maybe we would have helped him out a little bit more, but we had everybody else. And that's been the story. And so obviously we brought that into our PE curriculum here. We got an athletic PE curriculum rolling. We had some old school coaches. I took over athletic director for our, their girls basketball coach who's just retiring after being here for 32 years he's got over 600 wins. He finally bought into it. It took a long time. He's like, whatever that voodoo stuff is, but he had his own hip issues. He had some things, and he text me one night. He's like, hey, I can't sleep. This is a mess. Is there any chance you can try your voodoo stuff? And I did it. And he's like, the next day, he's like, I slept for the first time in forever. He goes, I was shocked, and you get all these stories, and everyone wants the research and the data and all that. But I'm a believer in it. If you're waiting around for that stuff, right. And this doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you any more time. You can do it within your other workouts. The kids do it to themselves. So that was the thing. When I learned RPR, I knew I wasn't going to do this stuff to these kids all before a game. I just,
right.
And so, our kids get in a big square. We teach it to them from day, we actually let our leaders now, because we're rolling in this since 2018, our leaders on day one teach it to our younger kids, and we talk about the reasons why, and we talk about performance and how the brain and we do all those things, and like I said, it's just a part of who we are now. It's part of our warm-up, and it's funny because once things start to trickle up, right, because things don't trickle down from like the NFL, they trickle up. Once the Tampa Bay Buccaneers start they say, rubbing their beards, as they were saying, then all of a sudden I start getting a few text messages, one from a pretty prominent college football program saying, what do you know about this RPR stuff? People are starting to say, well, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are doing it, right, they could care less if Camp Point Central is doing it. But, and that's fine. I didn't learn this to eventually, it's like I said, this happened. Now, did I think I'd be telling a whole bunch of people about RPR? No, I learned it because I was looking for whatever would put our team in the best position to be successful. And that's what I've learned through all of this, right? And then I've heard Tony say it. If it didn't win, it wouldn't be a thing. If RPR didn't help people compete better, it wouldn't be a thing. If sprint-based football didn't help programs become better programs, it wouldn't be a thing. It would trickle out like everything else, right? But it is. And what it's doing for kids and coaches' families, and reducing time commitment. And there's so much more than just the day-to-day training aspect. It's a whole philosophy about how you do things. And we've been able to keep our coaches here because they have more time with their families. And I think that's a huge thing. I got coaches on my staff that have been here for 16 and 17 years of the 18 that I've been here, because, we give them the opportunity to coach, but we also give them the opportunity to spend time with their families.
Well, it's a great point, because the time gets reduced and your performance gets better. I mean, that's what we call a win-win. That's a win-win there. That's what we call a win-win. It's funny because me and Derek have talked about this, and when kids go to trainers for, let's say, like, a basketball trainer or wide receiver coach, and as invariably they all do, right? And the issue you run into, they go and work out for an hour, doing all these things for an hour because the trainer is a quote unquote expert, so to speak, and they have to give you your money's worth. And one of the things that me and I've told Derek, and I said to him, I said, after watching all these things and sending my kid to these things and knowing what I know now, these guys would be better off running 30-minute sessions and getting the core things that they need to get done versus teaching everything they know in the kitty in an hour because they have to, because they want the parent to be satisfied, right? And they get more money because you can, instead of charging, I don't know, group session 40 for an hour, okay, and you get a bunch of people in your group, you could do $25 for 30 minutes. You get more money. You'd make more money and you get better results, right? And it's really like an education of it, because that's like, for me, I want to go and start inviting trainers to listen to you guys and to speak about it, because that they're getting kids hurt. I mean, they're not doing it on purpose, mind you.
Right.
They're doing it because parents are paying them to get more skilled, which they're doing at the same time that they're wearing them down, right? So why not get the skill development done without the wearing out portion of it, right? And that's the whole even with this guy, people who pay speed trainers, they go to, well, what do? 5 million hours of drills that they don't really want it. They probably know they shouldn't be doing all of this, but the parent is paying who doesn't really know that much. So they want their kid to come out sweating and worn out, right? But they're better off educating them on performance and working with them for 25 to 30 minutes and getting them better at the things they need them to get better at, the 1 or 2 or 3 things maybe that they need to get better at, versus this whole entire smorgasbord of development, which in the end, now they go back to, their coach and maybe they're lifting. Now they're more sore. Now it just builds. And next thing you know, the kid has to take off a week because he's just beat up, right? He just has to take off a whole week. Well, you could have gotten a lot more done over the period of time. Talk about how you think guys should start to address these things as we move forward and trainers start to develop athletes, because that's such a huge part of, I'm sure you see it with kids that you coach as well, going to different people.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get a lot of that here because we're in rural Illinois and we don't have a lot of individual trainers. I do some on the side, and it's funny you say that because I have a couple people that I train. I've trained for a couple years, but just, due to seasons, they're in basketball season and they're wanting to get in and do some speed work, and I just messaged a kid yesterday who's a really talented player and he wanted to do some work over Christmas break. And I just said, hey man, we're getting ready for competition season. You're getting ready for the postseason. Let's not introduce anything. Let's chat after your basketball season, because, yes, he could come to me and we could do some speed work or whatever, but that's a stress that he hasn't had in a while, because he's traveling from another school. And, selfishly, yeah, I could take the money, which there are people that think crazy. That think that Tony's out just to make money and it's all a business model and all this stuff. And, whatever, it's not, so we're looking out for this kid. And so I just said, hey man, let's go all in on the end of your basketball season. Then we'll talk training after that, and because that's what I think is best. And if I was his basketball coach, that's what I'd want. But what we run into more is more kids that go and want to lift after and lift extra, which is fine because we've only got, and I love it. I'm not in the athletic P world anymore because I'm in the AD's chair, but we had about 35 minutes a day to train, which I know some people that like block and that stuff, but I love 35 minutes. Like you said, you got to be pretty dang efficient in 35 minutes, whether it's in the weight room or with your sprint work or whatever. And I just felt like that times, I essentially, if our kids took off Christmas break, the 2 weeks in the summer that we take off, and a few other things, we were going to train 47 weeks out of the year. 47 weeks times 5 days at 35 minutes a day was plenty for me. But there are kids that may need to get stronger in some different things. They want to do extra. So we have those conversations. Hey,
is that built into your day, coach? Sorry to interrupt. I'm just
absolutely.
Oh, so you have a 35-minute block within your school schedule per day where your teams get to lift?
Yes. So we have 47 minutes, but by the time you change before and after,
of course.
RPR and that stuff. So it's something that I should probably talk about. So in that same time of 2017, I had an opportunity to take a couple other jobs. I was teaching history at the time, world history, to like 30 freshmen every dang period. And I'm like, hey, we're missing the boat in this athletic.
I don't miss those days.
we had a principal that when he came here, he's from a bigger school. He's like, you guys don't have a football class like in the morning where all your football players lift them?
Oh,
no.
Coach, preach, please.
So anyway, we were able to get athletic enhancement started for all athletes. We started with 2 periods, 1 before school, 1 during school, 2 turned into 3, 3 turned into 4. Now we have 4 periods in the morning. We get the 47 minutes, so we get about 35 minutes to train. We have 220 kids in the high school, 145 of them take this athletic PE across all of our sports, and it's been a game changer.
Absolutely.
We train speed, we train power, we train acceleration, we do all that stuff throughout the week. Our kids are consistent with their work, and that's something that's been a huge game changer for us during this whole time too. That those PE classes are RPRing and so forth. So that's why on Mondays in our sprint-based football program, we don't even take the field. We've done our sprint work in PE. We watch film, we game plan, we go home. And that sets us up for a better Tuesday where we're only in helmets, which then sets us up for a better Wednesday. And so, getting back to the lifting, there are guys that want to.
Sorry, Coach. I just wanted that clarified because it's something we don't have in New Jersey. And it's such a.
We went down south and they have modified block, down in Alabama, most schools where it's actually 90 minutes every day.
Oh, hell yeah. It's actually the same shit. You know what I mean? Holy hell.
And it's per team. Like the football team all trains together and the basketball team all trains together. We don't have that because, 220 kids in our school. We need our kids to play everything. And we don't have sports stuff during the school day and so forth. But we give kids and we communicate, hey, tomorrow is going to be a max V day. Don't go to the gym after school and hit heavy legs or whatever. Here's some auxiliary things you can do within what we're missing because we only got this time in PE, or this is what you need to maybe focus on. So we try to help them through that. And then on the flip side, when you record things, you learn things. So if you're getting information and a kid is running slower week after week after week, and you're like, hey, man, what's going on? And like, I don't know. And it's conversations about, a lot of times it's, I did some extra work last night. I'm like, wait, man, we just hit lower body yesterday and you hit it again today. And now we're trying to sprint and all this stuff. And then it's also conversations on sleep and nutrition and other extracurriculars that might be happening on the weekends. When you start a feed the cats approach where you record, rank, and publish as much as you can, which I coached football forever, and the most thing I ever did was take a stopwatch 40, and we didn't record anything.
Right.
I think you start learning so much stuff about your practice and say, hey, man, we were slow as heck today. Maybe it's because of what we did last night or what we've been doing in PE or what we've been doing in practice. And, man, you start learning a lot. And this year we wore GPS for the first time, and that also we learned some stuff this year. Things that we thought maybe we're on the low end of the CNS work on a Tuesday. We're actually ramping up our player load on Tuesday when we're trying to set up a big Wednesday. And then so we work through a lot of things this year. And I think it'll take another year or two to learn some more position specific stuff of what our guys need to be able to perform at their game, what we can give them within the realm of a day of practice that puts them in the best position. And I think that's a huge value of GPS that we learned this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. That workload, tracking that workload is a big deal. You end up being shocked as to what you're actually putting them through. It's amazing.
There's a lot of hidden high speed distance that you don't think of because it's maybe not contact, right? We all understand hitting, mashing each other and backing off of contact, but then at the same time, we continue to have some of these high speed things that are going on. And again, if every day, and if I think it's Coach Fortney, one of my buddies down at Alabama, who you guys need to get on this podcast, but he said, if you redline the engine all week, it's eventually going to blow on Friday night. And it's a good analogy.
It's a great way to put it.
We do that a lot. And it's late in the game. It's in big moments where all of a sudden the kid's knee or his ankle or whatever happens. And it's maybe not what happened in that game. It was what happened all week, put his body in a position to have that injury.
Those stress levels are really monumental things that we end up putting on the athletes that we don't even realize it. Talk about, so we talked about conditioning and like how coaches freak out about that part. In my opinion, you can do all the conditioning you want. Okay, like going back to the old school approach. The second they play their first game, it's a totally different element. And we've talked about this a little bit, I think with Tony maybe, or one of the other Feed the Cat guys that we had on. But it was, I thought what was really important is about that nervous system. Maybe it was Tony who brought it up, the nervous system thing that goes on when you're in this like increased a gameplay, basically, right? Real competition.
No, it was Mark Hoover.
Oh, it was Mark. Maybe it was Mark. That's all right. There you go. Thank God for you,
Derek. Yeah, because we had Mark on last week. We're good.
Thank God for you. So I think that's really an important thing that's been brought up is that, and I think back even to myself as an athlete. No matter what I did, the first game was like, whoa, like the pace, the movement,
shock.
Like you can't really simulate that until you actually play. And then what I notice happens is that once you get that, your nervous system adapts, I guess, and understands what that is, the next game and then the next game. And by the time you're in game 3 or 4, it has zero to do with whatever they do during a week. Like you just know your body understands how to exert energy throughout the game, right, for gameplay. And you no longer are breathing as heavy, And the thing I always noticed was like, I would always be like, the second series, I'd be like huffing and puffing. Now, I was a workout animal, so I'd be huffing and puffing the second series. Like, what's going on, And you're standing, so obviously, different. In football, you're standing when you only play one way in college, right? So you're standing the other half the time. So I'm like, why am I huffing and puffing? But talk about that nervous system element to it and how the body begins to adapt as you start to play gameplay.
Yeah, I think the basis of most people's conditioning has – it's nothing like they're going to see in a game, right? A gasser, it's at a pace that there's of nothing that they're going to see in a game, right? And that's why, in my opinion, the conditioning piece, the tempo piece, whatever you say, needs to fall within the realm of what they're doing. And I think, right, you can get that by working skill-specific things, change of direction things within your practice. And that's how you build the capacity, in my opinion, right? And then there's also the speed reserve aspect, right? Speaking of central nervous system, if I can run 22 miles an hour, right? And speed's a barometer of health. So I'm very healthy. If I can hit a 22 mile an hour, I mean, my brain, my body, everything feels good. I can play at the speeds I'm going to play the game, whether that's 16 to 18 mile an hour. I can do that all game long, right? But if I'm slow and I'm at 17 miles an hour, I don't care how many tempo runs, gassers, stadium stairs, laps, whatever it is, I'm not going to be able to play at 17 or 18 miles an hour the whole game because that's my top speed. And I think, too many people think that I've got to build this huge aerobic base, and then we never get to the speed and power and the change of direction, all the other things that we need. And then when we get in the game, right, and we have an acceleration at 6 meters a second, and we might have 3 or 4 or 5 of them. We've never done that, right? Because we've lived in the conditioning aerobic base world where I don't have to accelerate that fast ever. And then we get in the game. We had a kid cramp this year for the first time in a little while. One kid, and in game 1, and when we went back to the GPS data, he had 7 accelerations over 5 or 6 meters a second. And in practice that week, we had only gotten him 1. So it was something
that's a problem, right?
We were monitoring data. Yeah, we were monitoring player load and that type of stuff. But he was a wingback that had these high speed accelerations that, just within practice, we hadn't got him those. And so it was something that we said, okay, we got to make sure that we're getting these in throughout the week. And again, if we'd have ran across the field, if we would have did all this other stuff, he still wouldn't have got those in. It wouldn't have mattered. And I think, and nobody in sprint-based football is saying that you don't need a work capacity, right? But how you get that work capacity is the difference, right? And I think so many football coaches live in that fact that is the most important thing without training the other qualities. Well, when you put GPS on and you see that in a given game, hardly anybody's getting over 18 miles an hour except for maybe once or twice. If you never train above that, imagine what that does to your CNS and your speed throughout the entire year. If you just use the game, right, you have to peak that max velocity. We want to keep those. I mean, that's the biggest thing for improving the central nervous system is sprinting and tissue resilience. And how do you keep hamstrings, right? I mean, that sprinting is how you keep hamstrings healthy. It's not all the Nordics and all those other things. And if you never build those periods into your football practice, you'll never get them. And then when it's time to do that in a game, your kids have never experienced that. And that's why, to start the NFL season, you see all these people blow up because no one really sprints in the NFL anymore, or most programs don't, because, they want the fast guys out of the combine, and then they never train us, they never time a sprint ever again. And they expect their guys to be able to sprint when it's time. And you're dealing with the best athletes in the world, guys that are big and fast, which is a great combination. And, their body has to be built for that. And again, I think high school coaches live too much in the we'll out condition everybody to win the fourth quarter, when in fact the team that's the most explosive, fast, powerful, and healthy that can actually execute football is the team that's going to win in the fourth quarter.
Right. And I think it's a problem a lot of coaches deal with. It's, you coach how you were coached, and a lot of things haven't changed for a really long time, like you said, coach, and guys are a little nervous because they have that pressure of, so many other people, the best coaches are in the stands every Friday night. We all know how that kind of works, right? So, or even an administrator that why are you doing less, right? When it's always been more. It's just such a different approach. But when you attach the data to it, right? People want to see numbers. And when you attach that with winning, and then just overall having a conversation with your kids, coach, I feel so much better than I ever have before because we're doing it this way, right? I think that's one of the key aspects to this whole thing is the communication back and forth with how your players and the understanding, the open communication, and this is why we're doing this, and then they see the success that comes from it. That's when you can really hit the ground running.
Yeah, I think one thing, and coaches ask me, how do I sell this to my head coach? I said, well, are you timing anything? Are you measuring anything? Because if you're not timing sprints, measuring jumps, or anything, you don't see the impact that practice is having on your performance. So I think that's the first thing, Then when you say, okay, everyone in our program is a mile an hour slower this week than they were last week, it's like, okay, what did we do last week? And then I think the other thing that's again, it's anecdotal, but ever since we've shortened our practices, it's amazing how much earlier people get to practice to get some of their own work in, and that people stay after practice. To me, a good practice for me is the fact that, our most of our seniors get out at 12:30 from school. And then, they used to have to actually work, and now they can just go home. They don't have to. Some kids do work in between, but, gosh, they're walking. If we start practice at 2:50, I'll see seniors walking out there at 2:15, which I love, because then they're getting some, and it might be throwing, it might be a few routes, it might be some stuff, but it's why we all started playing sports. It's the love of the game. It's to go out there and where there's 100%. Not a bunch of pressure and coaches aren't yelling at you. And then we have kids. Yeah, we have kids that stay out. I mean, to me, that's a good practice. Guys that show up early and want to be there, and then guys that are willing to stay late. Then you know that you had a good practice. If they're dragging themselves off the field, and some coaches say, man, that was a great practice. These guys are dead. They use that as like the barometer of how the measuring stick was. I always want to try to do as much as we can that allows them to recover the best they can. And it's not an exact science. GPS helps. Right. But we don't want to do as much as we can and then just hope that we're going to recover. But yeah, I love it when kids are willing to show up early and stay late without being asked to. And I think the shorter your practices are and the more you worry about the kids' recovery, in fact, the more that they're willing to do for you in that regard.
That makes a ton of sense. I was one of the things I was wondering too, before we let you go, is like when they practice during the week, and in order to generate that extra speed, is it conducive for them to do portions of the practice without their pads on, so they're going faster?
Yeah, yeah. So on our Wednesdays, usually when we're in pads, we always carry our pads to practice, and so a lot of times we'll start practice with some type of sprint period, which could be, so they're getting it in PE already, and with GPS this year, the guys that had them, they would wear them in PE too, so we could see their, obviously spiked up on a track, they're hitting some pretty good speeds, but it was fun to see, the GPS data with our free lap data and that kind of stuff. But we may start with a kickoff period where the purpose is to sprint down as fast, be the first guy down, and we're testing that. Or we'll do some individual drills where maybe we're doing running back runs, with no pads on. And so then we'll put the pads on whenever the time is right. But yeah, just because we wear pads on Wednesday doesn't mean we wear them all the time. Sometimes maybe what we wanted to do from a padded perspective is in the middle of practice or towards the end. Then we might take them off for the end. You know, we do whatever we need to. And mostly why we wear pads is to fit up and to be able to do that stuff, which is different than when we're holding these shields and they're moving around. We don't wear pads generally to just beat the heck out of each other. Now, sometimes we say, all right, put the pads on. Let's go. It's 1st and goal from the 5.
Right.
Number 1 defense out there. Like we try to mix and match practice, whether starting offense and defense. We're never taking anybody to the ground, but we have periods in practice where you're going to have to stick your nose in there.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's the other misconception of people that don't understand what it is. They think we go out there in shorts, we throw a bunch of routes, and we play flag football. Well, we're a double tight wing T team that rushes for over 4,000 yards every year that has to stop. You know, the best team in the state of Illinois at our class of football is a full house wishbone double tight team that rushes for close to 5,000 yards and has won 7 state championships. Rick Aaron, which would be another great guy to get on here, at Lena Winslow. We played them back-to-back in 22-23, and if we could have won our semifinal game, we would have played them for the rubber match. But in 2023, we shut them out 14-0, and in a game that was 2 teams that were physically pounding each other the whole game. And everybody stayed in the game. Everybody was healthy. They practiced very similar to us. And so it's wild when people say, you know, well, that's soft football. Well, here in Illinois, when it's 20 degrees when you're playing in the state championship, you better be able to put your hand in the dirt and run the football. And this is what's given us the best chance to be able to do that.
Great point.
The running game is still good. It's still good to go in Illinois. I'll tell you that, buddy. Oh,
you know, this year the weather didn't really turn the way it does most years. So we actually had a few more teams that throw the football. We do have some really good teams. Rochester High School, which is not Rochester, New York, but Rochester, Illinois. I think they've won 8 or 9 public school championships. They do a phenomenal job, but they run the football out of spread too. But yeah, you can do both. But yeah, you've got to be able to run the ball and run it successfully in Illinois because there's no dome. Everyone's playing outdoor, and we play on Thanksgiving weekend, and it can get cold and snow, and there's a lot of weather to deal with.
St. Louis is coming out to Jersey this year, Coach, in the preseason. So
East St. Louis?
Yeah, East St. Louis is coming to Jersey to play in one of our showcases against one of the top teams. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, they're legit. They spread it out. Now, they're one of those teams that makes it every year, but they do a phenomenal job of everything.
Tony's already been on it. Oh, you're getting the best of Illinois out there, buddy. Okay, but we're good.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, it's been great having you on. I really appreciate it. Awesome stuff. Really, really insightful stuff. And, I'm sure we'll have you back on again to talk some more, but thanks so much for coming on, Coach.
I appreciate us being able to make it happen. And thank you for continuing to kind of spread the mission and talking to different coaches that have, different ways of doing things. I think it's best for coaches to hear from lots of different people. And then, as we say, build their own house.
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. All right, Coach, have a great day. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. That was phenomenal.
Thanks, Coach.
Great podcast. It was really great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah.
How many times do we have to talk about, different states and the way they do it within the school day of building in that football or, like he talked about it, that lifting period, 35 minutes, like
I think
across
it's very
sports just changes the game, dude.
Well, here's an interesting part about it too. So when I was in high school, okay, I don't know if this was the case at all, but when I was in high school, my father ran the phys. He was the chairman of the phys ed department, right? A big emphasis in at least with the older kids, like I think sophomores and beyond, was you had fitness as a choice, basically year round. So my father designed us within the phys. Like we had choices, right? You could choose. I don't know.
Of course. Yeah.
And what basically we did, which I would have to ask him because I'm not sure if this was on purpose because for his athletes, but what basically you did was most of the kids who were really athletes in like football or track, or kids who would work out and like have you'd
That's
have
what you take.
You would take that, and then you'd have the girls that wanted to stay in shape in Saddlebrook, like that
Of
would do like,
course.
the aerobic stuff. But
Love how you mentioned in Saddlebrook.
yeah, of course, Saddlebrook, love that. They yes. So those girls would do the class. So, but they would do the classwork with the female gym teacher, and then the boys would basically, for the most part, unless a girl wanted to go in and lift, the boys it was mostly athletes would go in. And we actually had like a lifting. We had that 40 minutes to be able to lift. So I used to, believe it or not, I at least
you did it at Mount Olive.
I used to get in most of my lifts
Yes.
during the school day. So, but that has changed in New Jersey and gym wise, because it's not as much. You don't have the athletic coaches don't drive phys ed as much as they used to. It's much
correct.
So that's changed. It's really like
most times you had the football coach that was in there for that, like, as phys ed teachers, right? Like, hey, you're going to have this gym, you're going to have that gym, you're going to have a group that, hey, we go to the weight room and that's part of our class. So at Mount Olive, it was our defensive coordinator would run that part of gym class. And, we would tell guys like, hey, football guys, like, get in there, get your workout in with Coach Binfatti, and you're good. Like, and it was a game changer to see the guys that did it that way in terms, if they were, like Liam, right, who was a 3-sport athlete, like he would get in there, he still got his workout in, and he felt like he could go hard and heavy and do all that stuff because it was during the school day. He wasn't rushing in there after school or had to come in the morning, to get all of his whatever in because he had to go play a game after school, or he didn't miss it because he had a game after school, or he didn't need to, hey, I can't do this because I have a game after school. He utilized that class time, which is what separates him, from most, but he was aware of that. And it was just a game changer. Coach talked about going down south where, they have 90 minutes of football and you actually lift with your team. Like, you don't have to be that extreme with it, but build that in. It's just such a game changer. And you want to talk about, why there's a shortage of coaches? Well, because they're spending all their time in practice doing all this other kind of stuff when it could be during the day, or it could be, those types of things. Like, there's ways to do it. It's nice to see that another state like Illinois does it. It's pretty cool. I mean, we talk Georgia, we talk Texas, we talk those guys have it built in, bro.
Like, I almost think that like they should in New Jersey. Like, let's say you worked out. Let's say you did your workout. You like coach had they lifted before school. Let's say, and that should count. Like, if you did it like as towards a phys ed class. And then if you normally have phys ed class at like, let's say, fourth period, then you could go and utilize that as a study period, like, I mean, that's kind of how I look, like the flexibility within your school system to do those things.
Right. And you also have somebody at the top that has to understand and see the and see the benefits of doing it that way.
In New Jersey.
Yes, it is because, no offense, like, some schools, every administrator was a coach, and then other schools, some of these guys never played a sport in their life and they really just don't understand it. And it's, sorry, bud, but, is what it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat how I feel about it in terms of that, because I know what sports did for me and whatnot. And not that you have to have had played sport to even understand it. It's just, I'd have to say the majority of the school plays sports.
I don't know if they do this anymore at South, but you know what they used to do with the kids that were in the band, and I thought they should do this for athletes too. The kids that were in the band, and they would have to come in the morning, right? Because the marching band or whatever, they counted that as a grade and credits towards your over. And unless you were an idiot, you would probably get an A, because if you were in the band, there were idiots that didn't get A's.
Too, man, they need to be doing agility. They're going side to side and doing all that kind of shit. The tube is heavy as hell.
My point was that Saddlebrook chose to count that as a class. It was before school.
Right.
Okay. So they chose to count that as a class that you can get a grade on. So that tells me that within certain parameters, you could choose to have that some of these things.
100%.
Right. Right.
There's wiggle room within the way you set up a curriculum and what is and isn't, in terms of you get credit for this, you don't get credit for this, you don't get, you know what I mean? Like, and I even look at like our school and we start very early. I think the first bell rings at like 7:05. They're done by 1:30, bro. Like 1:30, they're out of school. Yeah. And I mean, it might be 7:10, but and the reason they do it is because it's all a busing issue, right? Because the high school starts first, then you got to go the middle schools, then the elementary. Yeah, but look, I've been at numerous schools. The schools that started earlier always had an advantage, dude. Always we had an advantage in terms of whether it's just you're finishing early and then you're going to practice and you're out earlier. I mean, think about those days of when you had to rush around as a JV coach because literally you would get to the school and start the game. Like for most parts, we get to have our guys on a Monday get to sit through the entire meeting, right, of what we're going to do on offense, what we're going to do on defense before we even leave for a JV game, which is a game changer just based on schedule alone. And,
right.
Some of those things, if you really want to, I don't know. I think it's something that always needs to be looked at within a district itself. And like I said, to hear that coach kind of has that thing, and I think that's awesome, right? And look, it's nothing crazy. Like they do 35 minutes or 47-minute periods or, blocks or whatever it is, however your schedule is broken up, to have that opportunity for those people, those guys, those student athletes to do that within their schedule itself, it's a game changer, man.
There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Well, it really is. It's. I mean, you got to think out the box to get things done, and I think that's important. I'm so. I actually could think of a. There's actually a business to this, and not in the way, not in the way that Tony and them are doing it from like a clinic and educational standpoint.
Right.
But actually, there really is a methodology which I am going to work out that of how this should be implemented.
In terms of what, like the delivery of it,
to maximize.
Oh, almost like a time management type of gig.
No, to maximize performance for an athlete and to help with recovery. And I think Tony and. Brad and all those guys are teachers and coaches, right? So they're doing all this stuff at the same time that they have a lot of other stuff they have to do on their plate for the most part.
Right.
And I think there's a way to put a wrapper on all this that would be something that you could actually really build, because they're teachers first, so they don't think about it from like they're always. I listen to how they talk. They're always worried about people that are mad that you might make money from it, and that's always to me is how teachers think, because they're always taught to. Teachers are always taught, and coaches are always taught. At least in high school, I'm not. That does not count college coaches, because college coaches are out there to grow their financial pocket as well, but
to get the next best job.
Yes, to get the extra job, so they do not count in this. But high school coaches and teachers, basically, you become a teacher and a coach because you've basically said to yourself that I'm not trying to become uber wealthy,
rich,
and I want to be able to, for the most part,
definitely know that.
You know that, and you're going to go.
You don't get into being a teacher saying, "Man, I'm gonna kill it." You don't do it, right? You used to do it because. Oh, I get summers off. Like, well, that ain't the case.
And you want to help. You're interested in helping kids, so that's kind of a part of it, and you get the satisfaction from that. But there is actually, and I think it's always a mistake when that person doesn't make. Well, I'm like, everybody's got to make some money else to make a living. Well, here's I think an opportunity as this goes forward. There is a wrapper around this, meaning how can you get. And that's why I brought up the trainer thing.
Ooh, sorry, breaking news. The Jets have told Aaron Rodgers they will be moving on.
Oh, that was last week.
Well, but it's like confirmed. Like they've now put it out that we have formally informed Aaron Rodgers that we will be moving in a different direction at quarterback. Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, on Super Bowl Sunday, they actually it was announced that.
Well, now it's on X, so now it's real, Dave. Now it's real. It's on X. It came out. Here we go. All right, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
but yeah, you're right. They look at when teachers go and make money or look to do something of that. But back in the day, when a teacher had, in the summer had the landscape business, nobody gave a shit.
Well, I'm saying if a teacher went and go and train an athlete, like they almost feel bad when they take money. Right. So, and I'm like,
no shit. It's why I could never do it. I always felt so stupid. I'm like, I don't know, dude, $10.
But it's a crazy way. Here's why it's a crazy way to think, because there's a guy that may not be as good as you that's doing it, that is taking money.
Fuck.
So why not? If you have,
but he's really good at Madden.
If he has a skills, if you have a skill set, right? I mean, I
bet you he trains him wearing a backpack.
The financial advisor you have, he's getting paid. The insurance broker you have, he's getting paid.
I know. That's why I love working with you.
You know what I mean? Like they're getting paid.
You always like give me that, like, I don't want to say smack across the face, but it's like, buddy, business, dude, business. Stop being a fucking nice guy. Like business. Like it's about.
You could do the right thing. Like, look, are there people in business that do the wrong thing? Absolutely. Just like there are teachers that are
don't do shit.
Don't do anything, and for them, hey, I'll get $100,000 a year doing nothing. That's great.
And guess what? Next year, I get a raise, and if I get to a certain point, I can never lose my job. Like what the fuck?
So there's good and bad in everything you do, right? But it's there is something there, because I think the education of trainers. I'm not talking about what they teach as far as skill set wise, but their approach to teaching, meaning duration, recovery, like whatever you actually teach,
right.
That's what you're going to teach. Okay. Your philosophy of how you teach the skill. But as far as how you get the most out of them to get better over time, figuring that out, like, again, like once a week for an hour,
30 minutes,
or 2 times a week for 30 minutes. What do you think is better? Like, you're 2 times, and maybe it's 3 times a week for 30 minutes versus 2-hour-long sessions where they're burnt out and until the next time they come, and then they don't want to go back, or they're like, I'm really hurting, and then I hear
that was a terrible experience. Like,
right, I hear coaches say, "Oh, I got to pare it back because he's not. This is hurting or that's hurting." Well, instead of having to pare it back, maybe we pare it back from the get-go.
Right. Maybe you start with that in mind, and like Coach said, I think one of the great line, like, one of the things he just said that I thought was one of the best things overall was, sometimes we overvalue practice and we undervalue recovery. And as a coach, you're constantly being pushed to do more. Well, more sometimes is so, it hurts you in the long run,
There's no doubt. More can hurt you.
I think and obviously, like, he talked about wearing the GPSs. Like, that data is.
I'm actually rethinking. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I'm just going to get into the tracking of the data, right? Because it's always record, watch, publish, or whatever, their thing is about, like, here's what it is, dude. Like, here's what you hit. Here's where it needs to be. You know what I mean? Like, no kid wants to be on that board nobody wants to be at the bottom of a list, no matter what. I don't care what the list is, right? Like, you don't want to be at the bottom of the list, and you sure as hell don't want other people seeing your name at the bottom of a list. So when you implement that stuff, when you post it, when it's out there, when it creates a competition. Now you have to have the right culture in place to make sure it's a healthy competition, right? Or it's healthy in terms of, like, we're not like ripping the guy apart that's at the bottom. It's more of like, hey, we're doing this for a reason, and we're showing everybody kind of where you're at, like, push to get better. That's part of the culture stuff. But I mean, I just think when you record it and you now have that rock hard data of, hey, he cramped because he did this and we only gave him that during the week. That's on us, right? But you don't know that stuff unless you're reporting.
Let's look back to one of the most interesting philosophies in basketball as far as how he sub players was Dean Smith. Okay. I never thought about this, but he would play 10 players. He would play 10 players, right? That was their thing. They would have almost these line shifts like what you do in hockey, right?
Yeah.
And he would have these line shifts.
Full team.
And the team was wildly successful with it. And it's almost like, wow. Now, I don't know if this was his philosophy. I don't know, if this was his philosophy because is he alive now? Or he died?
No.
He died? I think he died.
He's passed
So
away.
we can't even ask him anymore, which sucks because I would have liked to ask him this, and probably no one ever asked him this because no one ever thought about it. But did you do that so they could play really hard, really fast for the time they were in?
Well, I will tell you, when I was at Mount Olive, there was a basketball coach there. Last name was Moore. Great guy. He was like what I would call a run and gun type of coach, right? Like fast breaking, up and down the court, nonstop. He would do it and sub in all 5. And then he would let them rest, and then he would sub in another 5. Like it was line changes. I mean, he wasn't subbing in a dude here, a dude there, a dude there. No, dude, it was get up and down that court, and then, okay, next 5, get out and go, right? And it worked to his benefit, right? Because other teams weren't conditioned that way or weren't prepared to do that. And it didn't matter, like talent level, yes. Okay, ultimately that's going to be whatever. But when your talented guy, you know what I mean, is fresh, then you're putting it on a different level. And even guys, now look at it the other way. When that talented player isn't fresh, right? Somebody that's lesser talented but is fresh can now win and be more, you know what I mean? So that just ability to be fresh is a game changer. You could take a mediocre player who's going full speed, you know what I mean? That guy might be faster than me in the first quarter, Dave, and that's kind of how I made my world was, look, you might be faster than me in the first quarter, but by the end of the game, I'm going to be running right by you because you're going to be shot. But I'm so conditioned, right? Like I know that I'm going to be better than you. And ultimately we're going to win because we're better and we're fresher. It's just kind of, when you track all that, dude, you can see it. And it's mind boggling.
No doubt about it. We have another one, don't we, today or no?
Yeah, dawn in about 20 minutes, give or take.
Perfect. I can go get myself a snack and come
Attaboy.
back. All right.
High protein.
High protein. I'll see you in 20 minutes.
All right, buddy.